Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of A Sip of Knowledge with Marty Duffy, Rhoades, and Lew Bryson. Plus, this week's guest, Dr. Rachel Barrie, who I will let your host give a more formal introduction to in just a moment. Real quick, before I turn things over to your host, I'm Will Hookinga from Savvy.co. Just want to point out a few ways that you can interact with your host and Rachel throughout the presentation. So on your right, you will see a chat box. Feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're joining us from. At the bottom, you'll see a button that says Ask a Question. If you have questions for Rachel or any of our hosts throughout the presentation, just enter them in there. I'll be keeping an eye on those for everyone holding things down over here. And last but not least, invite your friends to join us. There's a share button at the top of the screen that makes it easy to do that. But with all that said, Marty, Liz, Lew, I will turn things over to the three of you now.
Thanks, Will. You're like my third cousin by marriage. I love you that much. All right.
That sounds about right.
So, hi, everyone. My name is Martin Duffy, former senior master of whiskey for DIAGEO. I'm a former national brand ambassador for Benedictine.
Yeah.
Former co-producer of the Chicago Independent Spirit Expo, and for the last 6 years, the glorious and sole brand representative for Glencairn Crystal throughout North America. Yes, hello. Very good. Yay, all four of us. Oh, that's great. So yeah, listeners.
Great. So I guess this is the Halloween edition. I've got a pumpkin. There's a black cat. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Liz Rhoades, technical distiller and spirit consultant. I have just over a decade of experience in alcoholic beverage spanning across a couple different categories, beer, rum, vodka, but my particular expertise and favorite is whiskey. I've spent the majority of my career at DIAGEO, but now I'm founder and principal at Spirit Safe Consulting. So thanks, everyone, for joining. Over to Lew.
Thank you, Liz. I'm Lew Bryson. I'm a whiskey writer. Also write about beer, but mostly on whiskey these days. I was the managing editor of Whisky Advocate Magazine for about 20 years and author of Whiskey Masterclass, my later book. And thank you, Marty, for my previous book, Tasting Whiskey. Also a senior writer senior drinks writer for the Daily Beast. And just a note, currently working on an article that is just going fantastic about the sweet spot of bourbon aging. I got some really interesting information coming up on that. Marty, do you want to take it from there?
Yes, Lew, thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sip of Knowledge. Remember to drink deep from the well of knowledge. Today, we have a this is probably, not to besmirch our past guests, but this might be our most special of guests. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Our biggest of deals.
The biggest wheel of deals. She is just recently been inducted in Keepers of the Quake. She is a Doctor of Science from the University of Edinburgh, which, I founded. Whiskey Hall of Fame inductee. And she started off, I won't give years because you wouldn't believe just how she's young. She's very young. She was a Scotch
Marty in the Mire
Research Institute. She's been a master blender across the board. She denies it, but I'm saying she's worked for every major company. She for LVMH with Glenmorangie and Ardbeg, Morrison Bowmore, and Jim Beam, Beam Suntory. And then since 2017, she is the master blender for the single malt scotches of Brown-Forman. So such as BenRiach and GlenDronach and Glenglassaugh. Hello, it's Dr. Rachel Barrie. Welcome. Woo!
Hello. Hi, Marty. Hi, Lew. Hi, Liz, and hi everyone out there. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for that introduction. You're too kind.
You bet. That's my first question. Did you read page 261 of Lew's book?
I will.
Yeah. Really good bio. A really good little thank you to a certain Martin Duffy. Actually, I'm going to call you Dr. Barrie because it just sounds so impressive. I mean, if I was a doctor, my initials are MD, by the way, so feel free to call me doctor if you want. Could you give us a little synopsis of your journey into this industry? Because I mean, I'm assuming you started very, very young and very at a time when there weren't a lot of women in the industry.
Well, I mean, where do you want to start?
The beginning.
The beginning. I was born many decades ago.
Going way back.
Maybe a little too early.
In Aberdeenshire. So I was born very close to GlenDronach Distillery, which I work with now today. And my experience in the Northeast growing up was I knew people in distilling. My dad is a malt whiskey collector, so I was exposed to whiskey. My first taste was in 1976, where I literally just put my finger in a little bit of whiskey. It was for Santa on Christmas Eve, so that was my annual little kind of taste.
And first impressions were?
It was powerful, characterful, very, very rich. I think I was just blown away by its intensity. So it was only just a tiny little drop on my finger for many, many years. And it wasn't really until I was a student at university when I was 18 that I really got the taste of it. And because my dad collected whiskey, I used to get a miniature every single week, one to have as a nip and one to keep as well. So I collected miniatures in my university years. I couldn't afford a full bottle at that stage. And then when I left uni, I just happened to be cycling past the University of Edinburgh, and the last day of job was advertised at the Scotch Whisky Research Institute, and I just happened to, mosey on in and thought, oh, I didn't know such a job existed. I didn't know I could work in the Scotch whisky industry with a chemistry degree. I was kind of like, okay, are you going to be a perfumer or are you going to be on an oil rig?
I would have gone with oil rig. I would have gone oil rig with you. You look like North Sea. Yeah, that's where you.
Yeah. I'm hardy like you, Marty. Chicago, the northeast of Scotland. We're hardy folk.
I'm very dainty.
So I thought, oh, my perfect job. My God, I can work with my hobby. And I can research all about whiskey. So I was very, very lucky because I was given the job. First interview by Dr. Harry Rifkin and Dr. Jim Swan, the late, great Dr. Jim Swan, who was my mentor for 4 years.
Wow.
Since 1991 to 1995. So that was my, and then, I could talk about this for hours, but I mean, I sampled so much whiskey from, from all the distilleries at Scotch Whisky Research, where I had my first taste of this, which was the BenRiach Heritage bottle from 1994. And this one, I remember tasting this and analysing it. And it was, for me, it was the perfect estuary character, because one of my projects was into esters formation throughout the distilling process. So that was my first experience with BenRiach there, so tasting it. And then I went on to do some research into maturation and wood, lots of sawing wood down in the dungeon, Pentland Scotch Whisky Research that was on then, and analysing it in these nitrobenzene bombs to see what was inside the wood, from wood all over the world, warehousing. I could go on. and then, so that was under Jim Swan. And then I did, I was invited to join Glenmorangie and carried on the research into warehouse environment at Glenmorangie when I was in charge of the sensory and setting up the labs and quality. And I was there for nearly 17 years. So I had quite a journey through the warehouses at Glenmorangie, the wood finishes, really innovating with all of that. and lots of experiments. And then our bag came on board. So it was 1996, 97 when I was tasked with analysing our bag stock profile before the company actually bought the distillery. So that was just amazing. And then obviously lots of whiskies from our bag, much of which is in my storage cabinet, carefully preserved at the right temperature. So a few nice little nuggets, such as Lord of the Isles and
Dr. Barrie, what is the right temperature? What is the right temperature to store your whiskey?
Well, I would say around about 10 degrees is about right. 10 to 15 degrees. So you don't want to go below 4 degrees because, especially if it's non-chill filtered, and you might, flock might form. And then you don't want it to go above 20 because then you might get more evaporation as well. And then the humidity, you want to control the humidity. So, yeah. So it's a bit like how we store our vintage motorbikes in the garage. In big kind of vacuum packs,
motorbikes,
in the right temperature, just keep them nice and looked after so they don't get rusty and no humidity affects them, and all that good stuff.
I didn't even know there was a temperature for motorbikes. That's interesting. I'm sorry. I digress.
Yeah, there you go. And then on to, and there's lots of other things. Glenmurray as well. I worked with, did blending. Martin's, Highland Queen, Bailey Nickel Jarvie. Still got a bottle of that. That's long off the shelves. And then on to Morrison Bowmore. Worked with Bowmore, Auchentoshan, and also with Glengarry, also near where I was born. And lots of stories there. But you don't want me to go on, so I'll... No.
I'm just thinking it's true. You have been everywhere.
So yeah, and then latterly with Beam Suntory, I worked with Ardmore and Lafroig teachers. So I have been from Northern Highlands, first of all, with a bit of Speyside at Glenmurray, and then on to Islay, hop over to Islay with our bag, and then across to Bowmore on Islay, along with Glasgow and Auchentoshan, and hop up again to Glengarry, and then now back home to the 3 distilleries in the northeast, which actually were closest to where I was brought up. And I have kind of very fond memories, childhood memories especially of GlenDronach, because I was born very close to there. BenRiach, I learned to glide just across the road from BenRiach and canoe down the Spey. And at Glenglassaugh, my dad, we were in the kind of surfing canoe club in the northeast. So, from Findhorn River to Spey, to the Devon, to the sea at Sandend Bay. And so learned to surf there. So, so I'm now come back home.
Wow.
To work with these wonderful whiskies, from the mountains to the valley to the sea.
With all that, two things actually first comes to my mind. One, did you have to live at where each one of those? Did you have a house somewhere, and then you just travel and spend time around those distilleries for a while, or did you have to move to those locations?
No, it was commuting. So obviously, when I went up to Glenmorangie, I just stayed in Glenmorangie House usually, or a local hotel, for a few weeks, and did night shift on the stills and whatnot, and in the warehouses. So usually I didn't have to live up there. But then it was also working with Glenmurray, which my parents are still in the northeast, so it was that's a commute. That's just a day-to-day, like going to work. And I'm still the same when I go back, when I'm with GlenDronach, Glenglassaugh, and with BenRiach. My family home is right in the middle.
Wow. Well, it's apropos. And Scotland, about the size of South Carolina, I believe. So you're never more than 75 miles from the coast. Little piece of trivia.
You're not. And that's what makes Scotch whiskey so special. That's why it has this very distinctive character. Is because of the coast and how close you are to the coast. So
that was my second question for you, though. Having worked at all these distilleries that varied greatly as far as the character of the whiskey, what was that like? And what did you learn at one that you might have brought to another, or did you have to kind of wash your mind of what and
No.
kind of unlearn what you had learned because you didn't want it to influence?
No, of course
Okay,
not.
Right. All right.
It's like life. You don't forget what you did before. You
have.
kind of you build on it. You build on all your experiences, and it's like traveling the world, isn't it? Enriches your life, and you discover so many things you didn't know before, and that's the richness of the journey. And, I love variety. So that probably explains why I have worked with different companies, is because, when a whiskey's got to maturity, where it's kind of plateauing on its growth curve, I've kind of been, usually you've been approached and it's been like, oh yeah, I can take that to the next level. So it's been quite a journey. But I mean, starting with Glenmorangie, that was my, introduction really after being at Scotch Whisky Research Institute. So I was just immersed in it. 10,000 casks analysed in 3 years as part of the research project with Jim Swan. And, I was just immersed in it, measuring vanilla and pear drop in the main and the minty top note, and doing a lot of analysis on all of that. So I did lots of chemical analysis as well as nosing. So I learned a lot then about quality optimization using various techniques to understand where to put the casks and how many first fill bourbons to use versus second fill and all that kind of thing. That was a really enriching experience. But our bag just blew my mind because it was like the opposite extreme. So I went from delicacy, tall still, to, oh my God, the beast of the industry. And then I had Glenmurray kind of in between. So our bag was a beast, but it was a beautiful beast to get to know. And just getting to know Pete, that was my first introduction really to Pete. And he's a nice guy. Wasn't scary at all.
Can you enjoy a glass of whiskey without, because you spend a big amount of your time, a large amount of time, analyzing whiskey? Can you just go to a bar, order a whiskey, and not analyze it? There you go.
No.
Oh my God.
No.
I totally screwed up on the distilling. The wrong barrel was used.
No, it's not like that. It's like any experience where you connect your senses. You can't stop yourself, it's all part of the richness of the journey, and you have to stop and appreciate. And I'm definitely slowing down with age, and it just I pause and sense the whiskey, and it takes me on this journey in my imagination because of all the casks probably I've nosed. Picking out one out of that 150,000 is quite difficult, but it paints a picture. And, for me, I can't stop myself if I'm doing blind going, okay, that's Speyside. Okay, that's that side of Speyside. And that's, that's that distillery. And I get to it, and then the wood type, and you just can't help yourself. It's just the neural pathways are formed. You can't just stop. It's straight to the nose, into the memories, the feelings, the emotions, the pictures, everything, and it just comes flooding in. So but that's the fun part. That's the richness of the journey. Yeah. So everyone's been completely different. And then Bowmore, wow. I mean, Bowmore was so different again, so in the middle and balanced, but with different sides to it too. So that was fun. Auchentoshan, triple distilled. And then Glengarry, really meaty and spicy, just like haggis, remember my grandmother's haggis. And then coming to BenRiach, I mean, especially, you can see behind me, this is the new range. And BenRiach's got really that whole journey in terms of distilling styles, because we do we've got the floor maltings, just like at Lafroig and Bowmore. And we've got, but obviously in the northeast, we've got the classic style, very fruit forward, luscious aspects of Glenmorangie, you might say, but more of an orchard and a little bit more luscious. And then the smoke season as well in September. So that kind of really opened my mind to how different whiskies can be with smoke and how different the Speyside smoke was. So that was really, really rich. And I get to play with all of that, plus 64 different cask types in the warehouses at BenRiach. So yeah, it's all kind of come together in one distillery.
Or the question about the floor, you mentioned the floor malting, and that's, so you guys are only doing that, I think, a portion of the year.
Yeah, yeah.
Use as sort of a special sauce in the blend, or is that something where you're sort of reserving that for a special, variation?
Well. We still have stock. We have stock going right back to 1966 at BenRiach. So the floor maltings were obviously there since 1898. Distillery closed in 1900. Didn't distill again in 1965, but the malt from the floor maltings went to all the other distilleries. It was the source of the malt. It really boosted the other distilleries. And then it started up again in 65. And we've still got whiskey from 66. So that will be all floor maltings. And in the 70s, we've got peated as well as classic. And now it was closed for a spell and was reopened again in 2012. So we have every year since then pretty much been producing the floor malted whiskey. So it's only now just turning 8 this year with the distillation. I'm trying to remember. I should have remember this, but it's December actually, so we're just coming up to it being 8 years old, the floor malted whiskey. But the older whiskies would have been floor malted. I mean, commercial maltings didn't really start because we didn't get North Sea gas into St. Fergus up in the northeast of Scotland until the 70s. So, and it's interesting because in the 70s was when the commercial malting started. And it's when most distilleries in Speyside actually stopped using peat. It just was like a switch. 1974, I think, was the year that I recall from the whiskies I've worked with, that most of the distilleries, the peat just went because they no longer had to use peat for fuel. They could just commercial maltings. And that's also when distilling increased in volume and when distilleries expanded because they had these commercial maltings. So we are very much keeping alive the tradition. And it's mostly in kind of May time that we're doing it. It's about right for the right temperature. It's when you get that sweet spot of temperature and humidity and airflow and everything just about right, which is always best in the spring or in the autumn. So yeah, sorry, I'm going on.
That's what this is all about. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't have invited you, and the three of us would just talk.
There was something I wanted to go back to.
I love these comments. Sorry.
You mean
we've got those.
Said he popped the cork on my first bottle of the new GlenDronach 15. Love what you have done with it, Rachel. Delicious stuff. Keep doing it. Love it.
Okay, easy. You're riffing.
Thumbs up. Thank you.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back and ask one of the things I was curious about. You said when you, particularly when you said when you get to Ardbeg, how long does it take to get familiar with the stock of a new distillery as a blender? Because you've got to know
never stop.
I guess, yeah.
It just keeps changing. It's a really big problem. You can never sample enough whiskey because it keeps changing. It's a huge problem.
I know a couple of guys at a local bar feel the same way.
Because as soon as you've sampled a cask, a month later it's changed.
Yeah.
And then it's changed. And then you discover something new and I've got to sample another 100 casks to understand this. And then it's just like the ultimate researcher's dream, because you never really nail it because you're always trying to understand how it's changing because it's nature, you never really understand nature, do you? It's bigger than us. So there's always something new to find out and discover. But yeah, I mean, you do sample thousands of casks in answer to your question. Absolutely. Once you've sampled maybe 2, 3, 4, 5,000, something like that, you kind of get a good feel for what the inventory is like, the shape of it, the style of it. With peaty whiskey, you know, how the nuances of peat vary between different months in the year, between different years, you know, almost the vintage effect that does exist, I believe, in whiskey. And I discern it all the time. I do notice nuances between vintages. You know, the very subtle changes that happen with changes in barley variety or the weather, for example. And you notice these nuances. So you're always trying to get to know. It's like getting to know a good friend. You want to get to know it better, get to know its layers, get to know how it reacts to the weather, get to know how it is in that cask, in that corner of the warehouse. And, you know, if it's not doing too great, you know, just like a child at school, it's not liking that very much, you've got to move it into another school. You've got to move it into a different place in the warehouse. So it's really just getting to know and nurture the best nature of that distillery, which is a big part of it as well.
Well,
sorry, I got to follow this one up. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
sorry, Marty. I love you, dude.
He is the worst.
So sorry, this is right out of the book, and I need to follow this stuff up. The different parts of the warehouse. What's changing? Is it humidity, temperature, air pressure, all that?
All that.
All that.
Dunnage, racked, you know, if it's stone walls, if it's a modern warehouse, racked warehouse or dunnage, how close it is to the sea, where those doors open, how often do you open those doors?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh God, yes. And all just mixes, all makes a difference.
So there was a number of years ago, this is back in the aughts, I'm pretty sure, there was someone from LVMH, and they're talking about a new expression that was going to come out. It was they wanted an age statement. They wanted a 40-year-old, but there was a cask that was 39. But then they were afraid. They thought it was really, really good right now, and they were afraid that just that extra time in the cask to get it to 40, they were really afraid that it would drop off. You know, so how often do you deal with something like that where, you know, the marketers want an even number statement, and then you're going, it's really good right now. You know, if you leave it in a little longer, not quite sure what's going to.
Yeah. I mean, that does happen. I would say something at 39 and a half years old, though, it's lived that long. If it's lived that long in that cask and it's really good, you know what? That 6 months isn't going to do any harm.
Really, though?
I would say
leave it alone and not talk to it.
Exponential kind of plateauing of flavor over time, and how it evolves and how it all integrates, you know? Once it reaches a certain age, it's so integrated, it's so mature, it's so mellow, it's so fine. You know, it's not going to be disrupted by a few months, unless it leaks, of course.
Let's see, there you go. All right,
that's always the risk, or the strength drops, but it shouldn't in that long, unless it's a flood or something.
So you believe that the influence of the sea, though, because Lew, harken back to that round table that Malt Advocate did many years ago, probably 18 years ago. Remember that, where you had all the guys around the table, and they're talking about the influence of the sea on whiskey, and yet, you know, many Islay whiskeys are not matured on Islay; they're matured inland, yet they have a sea character. So what's
we're talking about the coast, so I can't resist it, you know. Glenglassa, you know, Glenglassa. And do you know what? I've worked with Islay whiskies from the coast, and Glenglassa to me is more representative of the coast than any other malt I've ever tasted. There's nothing like it. Nothing like it in Scotland. There's no other. That's why it was closed for 20 years, was because the previous owners could not substitute it in the 80s for another malt and a blend, you know, and that's before malt whiskey grew. It was really only blends. Single malt only really started to grow in the late 80s for bottlings into the 90s and onwards. And it was just so distinctive and so different. And it's, you know, for me, many of the flavors of the still are the holy grail of single malt for many people. because of the tropical fruit character.
And
Tropical fruit and salted caramel. Where does that come from?
That's just kind of building on, what Marty asked in terms of, is it more about the raw materials you're using, the geographical locations, or is it more about like what you've seen a distillery thumbprint? Whether it's how the still designed, for example, whether you're in wooden washbacks or open, or you're in a metal fermenter.
All of it.
Okay, yeah, and
all of it.
Right.
Synchronicity, my dear. Synchronicity. Add it all up and you're going to get something completely different. But yeah, it's remarkable because, in Scotland's not a big country, as we said, South Carolina? And it has the most diverse spirits in the world with only 3 ingredients. Yeah. Dramatic diversity of style. Do you disagree?
No. I always point that out to folks. And in fact, Mike Miller, who owns Delilah's here in Chicago, big whiskey bar, once pointed out to somebody, he said that, if you're a bourbon drinker, you'll like most bourbons to varying degrees. At least you'll taste that bourbon flavor. But Scotch, it's amazing considering it's made from the same ingredients because it runs a whole spectrum.
It is the gastronomy of the spirits world. Single malt.
Ooh, I'm stealing that.
Gastronomy of the spirits world.
I gotta look up what gastronomy means.
Gastronomy.
Like it.
Food.
I know.
It's food of the spirits world.
I'm not as dumb as I let on.
So in Glenglassaugh, you're going to get, your salted caramel, your tropical fruit, this saltiness, very luscious, coastal, and it goes brilliantly with sushi and sashimi. Whereas if you go to, this is obviously right on the beach, Sandown Bay, and then you go to GlenDronach, deep in the valley, inland, but it's still only 17 kilometers from the sea, but it is inland, deep down in the valley. And, it's like your meat and veg, it's like your main course. It's like, it's really robust and weighty, and it's going to give you that full, richly satisfying character. The sherry cask maturation, but also the distillery location, ingredients, and distilling style as well. And then, of course, you've got BenRiach, which is just like being in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory.
Except for adults.
Except for adults.
Yeah, you don't.
But even then, BenRiach always has this beautiful tension of delicacy and body from Speyside. So it really is like Speyside in a glass. So yeah, lots of comments here, aren't there? I feel like I'm not reading any.
That's okay. That's what we're here for.
That's what this is for.
So, great question from Johnny Jeffrey. So, hello, thank you for your question. He says, if I have my history correct, GlenDronach moved away from direct fire about 12 to 15 years ago. Is there a difference in the spirit in that transition from the direct fire to indirect to steam?
Well, you tell me, guys. Because you maybe have tried it. You've maybe tried it. You maybe tried 12-year-old back in 2017. And you could get a glass of 12-year-old today. And that shows you the transition. So please do.
We don't have as much as you have, though. a lot of it. I only get to taste it when Stuart comes around.
Well, if you compare a bottle from, say, 2017-18, because it was 2005, so around about then, and then compare that with now, you'll see no difference.
There's no difference.
I would say you'll see there's no difference, or it's the same great whiskey in the bottle.
Well, that goes back to something Lew was talking about as far as learning about you. It's always about Lew. When you've moved from these great distilleries, and not only do you have to learn about the the history of the whiskey, and usually the history of the distillery, but also you have to maintain it. You may have to maintain that consistency and maintain some of that flavor, and that has to be nuts because you're right in the mix of it. You're the one vatting these whiskeys together. And why don't they call you a master vatter, as opposed to
have
master
the same
blender?
ring to it.
No.
There's a little bit more to it than that.
The mad vatter. How about the mad
I
vatter?
mean, the vat
No,
men
because
do
the
a
SWA doesn't
fantastic
like the
job.
word vat, apparently. So
The what?
the SWA doesn't like the word vat. They made that pretty clear when they got rid of it. No more vat
Well, a
involved.
vat's a big vessel, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is.
So if you're a vatter, if you're a vat man or woman, it sounds a bit like Batman and woman.
See?
What are we just talking about?
Here
Is
we
that
go.
where Batman
Batman and Blender. That's the duo. That's the super duo. Batman and Doer. Forget it.
So I'm going to just circle back on this question, just to retool. I think that's, a pretty critical question. And I think a lot of people don't realize, what all that happens, in the role of master blender. There's definitely, the sensory analysis or, the tasting element, but there's really so much more. And I don't think, that's talked about a lot. I don't know if you want to run down some of those key elements.
Absolutely. Well, when we're talking about Batman, actually, I'm more like Spider-Man because I'm in the middle of that web.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sitting in that web. In the web, in the matrix. And what I mean by that is, you have to work with touch every single part of the process, from the barley, working with, the supply there, into the distillery, and looking at all the settings and how the process is set, how it's adjusted with different seasons and temperatures, different setting temperatures and whatnot, and then nosing every spirit off the still. So for every distillery, every time the spirit flows into that spirit receiver, nosing the spirit, taking notes, understanding it. And then if I find something different, it's like, oh, what happened there? Let's close the loop. Let's understand it. Yeah. Are these seasonal nuances, etc.? So that's a big, big part of it. And then in addition to that, I'm outsourcing the wood, getting to travel when I get out of this cabin, getting to travel, and source from Jerez, go to obviously Louisville, Cooperton, Alabama, all around the world sourcing casks. So that's a big part of it. And that's where you need to tune in. First and foremost, I am a consumer. Okay. So connections is the most important thing. And just like the richness of all these different distilleries that I've worked with, the richness of traveling, the richness of meeting different people from different cultures and geographies and seeing what they enjoy and taste and what goes with what and what's going to work where, and understanding the essence of the distillery as well, and staying true to that, staying true to that DNA, right, that character, bring it to life, amplifying it. So that's a big part of it. And then obviously working with the brand teams, with sales teams, doing stuff like this, getting out to chat about it, and then getting back again onto my computer, into the warehouse, looking at the inventory, managing the inventory, the wood policy, the strategy, the portfolio as well. So, and there's lots more besides. That's just a touch, that's a little bit of it.
There was, when back in the day, in my DIAGEO days, we went up to Jim Beveridge with a little factoid that we read somewhere, and where we got it, I have no idea. But they say a master blender because you work so hard on accentuating your sense of smell. I mean, you work mainly with your sense of smell with the whiskeys, that where most humans can readily identify or detect and identify about 25 different aromas, in a common day. A master blender is capable of detecting and identifying over 800.
Yeah, probably over time. Well, because if you've noticed 150,000 casts, they're in there. You can't get them out. They're locked in the neural networks and the sensory connections in the limbic system.
Well, they must get noisy in there.
Yeah. And it does. And then all the pictures you painted and all the memories of your journey and everything's all interwoven, just again like this big web, this big connected web between everything.
This is where all those crazy titles on Scotch Malt Whiskey Society bottlings come from, isn't it?
Well, you can, when you smell it, you can't separate from and it is very personal and it can be geographical, but then that's the fun of it as well, isn't it? So I noticed somebody mentioned Torfa. Oh, yes.
Yeah, Torfa.
Tina. Speak to Torfa as an influence. Absolutely. Torfa, of course, means turf or peat. And Glenglassaugh Torfa is, it's just got this wonderful salted caramel. It's got the luscious, you can almost smell the sound, if you know what I mean. Here I'm really connecting my senses. I don't need to hold it to my ear. I can hear it when I smell it. I can hear the sea when I smell it. Because it takes me there so much that my other senses are amplified.
Kicking in.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, your sense of smell is the number one key reminder of memories. So, trigger of memories, and so that makes sense. If you're smelling the sea, you can end up hearing the sea. Plus, if I blow into my glass, it sounds a little like a surf. A little bit.
I've not been blowing into my glass. I've just been sniffing from my glass. But
by the way, your global brand ambassador, Stuart.
Hi, Stuart.
He's on, and he's going to share a dram with me anytime.
Oh,
Excellent.
Cool.
Make sure they're full bottles left on my porch.
Actually, do you guys have a dram, or is it too early with you in the?
No.
US?
Oh, I've been.
Oh, you've got one.
I don't have any of your whiskey on my.
I don't have any yours here. No.
Yeah, I've been trying to steal Stuart samples when he comes to town.
What to do?
So this is Torfa, and it's straight to the sea. All that salted caramel, and I'm on that surfboard. I'm back to being 10 years old. First experience surfing in the sea in Sandown Bay. And it's just so expansive and open and lush, and it feels elemental and tempestuous and all that good stuff. Always changing.
See, that's the other. I think that's one of the beauties about whiskey. You never hear anyone talk this way about vodka, and not get on the whole kick a little vodka around. But when you do a spirit judging and you get the vodka table. Oh, it is like purgatory. It really is. And then, but you go to whiskey, and all of a sudden, and you're doing it beautiful, Dr. Barrie. You're all over this is the kind of stuff that draws people into whiskey.
This is just amazing. It is literally that lovely ice cream drizzled in raspberry sauce and salted caramel, on the beach.
See,
and it's also got that wonderful smoky barbecue. So you've got your little campfire on the beach going, and the tide's rolling in, and it's whooshing in, and it's bringing all that lovely air and all that microflora that's then weaving its way. It's going through the air, and it's filtering in through the distillery. Open doors straight into the still house. Then it meanders through the washbacks, the wooden washbacks, nice long fermentation, all that microflora influence in the yeast, and then up the hill a bit into the coastal warehouses. And it comes to the dunnage warehouse first, and then eventually it makes its way up to the racked warehouse, up the hill.
See, that's
is there anything to my wife's a biologist. And it seems like every month or so, there's another discovery about the gut biome, about how the microflora and fauna that are in our gut determine our health, and how important it is. I know about the microflora in fermentation. Does microflora affect anything in the warehouse? I don't know. I never
Well,
thought about it. It just occurred to me.
If you talk about wine, okay, it's different. I know everything's different. But the yeast is on the grapes, and of course it's local, and it's a local microflora. And of course the yeast is distiller's yeast. We use cream yeast, and it is brought in, etc. But the wooden washbats obviously have the lactobacillus. But what's in the air, do you think, coming off the sea, potentially?
Seagulls.
There's a few seagulls in there, and at Glenglassaugh, of course, in Sandown Bay, used to be many moons ago. It used to be underwater. It was tropical, and it was right under the sea. And it has the highest mineral content, Glenglassaugh, that I believe. So this is just me, but I have analysed quite a lot of water from different distilleries. The highest mineral content of any water on the mainland. So we're talking about like 250, 270 parts per million calcium carbonate hardness, which is like off the scale, and it's all that rich sea life, all those bones of the fish and everything that over many millennia has formed into this limestone strata and this serpentine marble that is unique to Glenglassaugh and comes through into the fermentation, into the water, obviously, and then is in the air as well. So you have that, and then you've got all the aspergillus off the sea. So because it's such a rich sea life, very oily fish in Sandown Bay and along to Port Soy, really oily fish, and similar to what you get around the waters of Japan. Actually, it's quite interesting, I find, because I get this note of soy in Glenglassaugh as well.
Oh.
Well, now, would you say also, because the air is playing a big part, the west coast of Scotland and Ireland get the Gulf Stream coming up, and there, you have palm trees, and you have this kind of slightly tropical for Scotland, a tropical breeze coming up. Do you feel that's affecting whiskies they're maturing along the west coast? Or no?
Well, it affects the temperature, obviously. On the west coast, it's quite different because I suppose it's milder, but then it's it's very tempestuous as well. A lot more rainfall. It's more influenced, I think, by the rain, and it's got like 4 times the level of rainfall as BenRiach. So, if that much fell on BenRiach, I'd be very, very surprised if that was to ever happen, in the future, because our weather at BenRiach is like Barcelona, and we get 40 days more sunshine there. At Glenglassaugh, I would say it's quite a different. The North Sea, is quite different. Yeah, absolutely, from the Gulf Stream. Yeah, it is different. I haven't explored exactly why, but I will now. But yeah, very, very different. But yeah, the influence of because Glenglassaugh is in a bay as well. And because it's got the best surf in Scotland, it's got a surfing school even there. So, it's got fantastic surf in that bay. I can't think of anywhere else that has that. And because the waves, are literally, curling, rolling onto the shore, there's more release of
gotcha.
in the sea because of that motion than you would just get in a dense body of water that's just kind of moving about. Yeah. Anyway.
So we had 2 questions. A lot of people are asking questions, so really excited that you're on the show today. So question from Brad Krause. So when blending, is the main aim to achieve consistency? I guess it depends on what your product, I guess, or the
yeah. I would say it's to deliver to exceed expectations. So consistency is an interesting one. I'll use GlenDronach 12 for this because this is our main whiskey. And in creating this, using Pedro Jimenez and Oloroso casks, so I've sampled hundreds and thousands of casks. But I want to achieve this rich balance of flavor. So it's more about balance than consistency, I think. It's about balance and integration of flavor. Obviously delivering a consistent natural color. This is all natural, so we've got to analyze every cask and see what's happening in there for color before putting it together. So there is that element of consistency and color, and then to deliver the balance as well, the complexity and balance and integration of flavor. I'll be picking casks from throughout the year, looking at the nuances of different distillation dates, how things combine. So yes, I would say for 12-year-old, you want this to have a sip of this and for it to deliver. You want to come home, kick your shoes off on a lovely autumn evening, and for it to just take you to that place that just makes you relax, and you know what you're going to get, really. With new products, though, you can really explore flavor and try different things out. So that's great. That's the really exciting and fun part, is where you are imagining a particular character style, and you go to create that, take you to a different place.
Have you tried whiskeys from previous master blenders, the various expressions they've put out, and tasted any difference? Just because it's another palate coming in, and even though you might be going off past notes, it's, your palate's still unique to anyone else's. So do you ever find any kind of change in there?
Well, I would say that's probably where, I'm a perfectionist, so I'm always trying to optimize and fine tune. So the nature of that is going to have, there's going to be subtle differences, I would say. And then deciding, as much as anything, deciding on wood strategy as well, because that's kind of evolving with time too. So, you've got different kind of, the distillery is unchanged over time, but the ingredients that you're working with there might be some subtle variations that you are kind of having to work with. So you're doing the best you can. Some batches can vary more. So, somebody else in my job, you might find there's more peaks and troughs between batches. Whereas, I've heard a lot of people say about GlenDronach just in the past couple of years, it's just so, you know what you're going to get. It delivers. It's not kind of jumping around, bouncing up and down from one direction to the next.
But it's like, it would be, using the old analogy of an orchestra, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All the barrels, all the casks are different instruments, and then you are the maestro. But, every maestro comes in, they always put their little stamp, on it. So it's Boston Pops is still Boston Pops, but
I want two piccolos in my orchestra.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm a big piccolo fan.
Brian
Piccolo.
A follow-up question with that. As a chemist, so there's definitely, schools of thought or camps where it's analytical chemistry versus, sensory analysis. As a chemist and a blender, where do you see those two tools working together? Do you rely on, sensory analysis more? What do you think, what have you found has been helpful?
I would say I started as a chemist and I became a blender. And some people don't do that way around. Some people don't start as a chemist, more doing these days. But I started as a chemist. And for me, that was learning the theory. So, it's very useful being able to understand all the compounds and the science behind it. But at the end of the day, I think the sensory is the most important thing. And you use the analytical as a tool. Analytics cannot predict the future. And well, you could say neither the nose can, but the nose is better at doing that, I would say, than analytics. The analytics you can analyze, if you'd have to have an army of machines to do what the human nose can do.
Right.
You know, the human nose can pick up
Yeah.
10,000 different aromas in that 1 centimeter squared of olfactory epithelium. And to be able to take that detector of olfactory epithelium and put it in an instrument, you need a fluorescence detector, you need a nitrogen detector, you need a sulfur detector, you need a flame ionization detector, a mass spectrometer,
It's
near infrared.
just a question.
It's all in there.
But, you know, I've seen it come up a lot. It's sort of a polarizing topic. I've definitely seen people where they're like, let's eliminate all subjectivity. Analytical is the way, because, you know, it's very objective, and you can kind of, it's going to be the same every time, as long as, you know, the instrument is calibrated. But I think, you know, very much to your point, it's like, well, you don't have the sensitivity that you have with, you know, the human nose. So it's just an interesting question that I like to kind of pick each other's brain on, especially with your background.
That's why tropical fruit is so interesting, because, you know, for 6 years, you know, it was this elusive tropical fruit character in really old whiskey, which is thought by many to be the holy grail. You know, how does this come to be? And it's right off the still in Glenglassaugh. But guess what? No chemist in various countries of the world has actually managed to really identify it and understand it and control it, or even know where it comes from completely, because that the particular compounds involved, many of which are actually sulfur compounds, related compounds in mercaptans and whatever, are, you know, detectable to the human nose at parts per trillion level. Exactly the point you made. So to be able to try and quantify that, there's no detector that can do it. So it just appears, and it's elusive, and it's so true to particular whiskies at particular times. Straight off the still with Glenglassaugh. It's like lilt. You probably don't get lilt in the US, but lilt, not Sprite. It's pineapple and grapefruit, basically. It's a drink we get in the UK and have done since my childhood. And it's pineapple and grapefruit straight off the still. And this just blows my mind. And salted caramel as well, straight off the still. I can't think of any other distillery that has that. And yeah, good example.
That point, another comment from Johnny. So subjectivity is where the beauty is. Analytical is lovely, but do we really want the robots deciding for us? And I think that's part of, I think, why people are, certainly probably why you are passionate about whiskey. I think, you know, why a lot of people, I mean, Marty, you mentioned earlier, it's, you know, sort of where science meets art, or art meets science. And I think that's sort of, you know, the beauty of the industry.
Well,
maybe if we sell whiskey to robots, robots can analyze it.
There you go.
Be careful! Don't give the marketing companies any ideas.
But as long as we sell whiskey to humans, we have to analyze it.
You know what's interesting? If you guys, with Halloween coming up, I'll use a horror reference. If you've ever watched the movie The Fly from the 1980s, he sends a piece of steak through one of these transponders, not transponder, a pod, you know, telepod. That's it. And so he's sending it, and it comes out, and it tastes funny because it's synthetic, because it's not real, because he wasn't able to teach the machine what the flesh should actually be like. And that's kind of what the analytics is. I love the fact that there's a human component, you know, really dictating the flavors, and not some machine.
Yeah, because I've had some of those whiskeys that do the accelerated aging thing by recreating the exact profile of the whiskey, and it's not the exact profile of the whiskey.
No. It is to the guy who's making it. Yes. They always think it's identical. No, have you tasted the real stuff?
Yeah, I can blind that stuff.
Yeah, nature is far more complex.
Yes. Lizard, you got Christina?
Yeah, we have one last question. Lew, were you leaving us, or?
I actually want to hear the answer to this one.
Okay.
If you're going with the coastal south thing.
Question.
Dan.
Danny can wait.
Dan.
How would you characterize a coastal style whiskey, and what do you think they are? Or more precisely, does this style even exist?
I think so, but then of course Scotland is all coastal to some people. To those in the middle of the US, you know, if you're in the Midwest, you know, we're
It's gonna
never
be
far
coastal.
from the coast. It's going to be coastal. But the closer you get truly to being on the beach like Glenglassaugh, you know, I think it's that what you think is salty, but actually is the influence of the microflora in the air on the fermentation and on the maturation. So there's definitely an ethereal freshness that you get. There's more oxidation, the humidity influence, and the microbiology. It's a combination of everything. So there's definitely a coastal style, and yeah, I would say salt associated in character, and salt associated, even though it's not sodium chloride, will be on certain parts of your tongue. And tropical fruit actually goes closer to your salt associated taste buds than it does to your the usual acidity taste buds.
See, I think that'd be interesting to do a comparison. I don't know if anyone has a distillery, say, on the shores of Lake Superior, which anyone who's visited Lake Superior, it is as wild as any ocean. It's incredibly dangerous, and as we know, November never gives up their dead.
Heard that.
Superior,
I'm not aware, but I've heard that.
You can't recreate it. You know, other parts of the world have tried to recreate Scotch. Using exactly the same designs of distilleries, you know, tried to replicate everything.
The Japanese tried for a very long time to replicate Scotch whiskey, and eventually they settled on their own, which turned out to be really, really good.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm going to take that opportunity to leave. Rachel, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Lew. It's been great to see you.
Great to see you.
And yeah, stay in touch. Stay well.
We'll do. You too.
Take care. And Slanjava, good health.
Bye, Lew.
Slanjava.
Rachel, I had a question for you. When you join a new distillery or a new supplier, like with Brown Forman, will you be able to put out your own expression at some point, where it is your own unique creation that's just, you know, you're picking up cask, so it's not carrying on the tradition of the existing statements that are already out there, but you're creating your brand new own.
You mean like the BenRiach range?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, but BenRiach, but
it's just been launched.
Oh well, yeah. There you go. I mean,
full portfolio. It's winging its way. Actually, the bottles are in the US. They've just not hit the shelves yet. I think it's going to be in the next couple of weeks.
So
yeah. So this is the perfect example. So
there you go.
Where there were many different bottles of, you know, quite single-minded in some ways, like a peated Marsala cask and then a sherry classic cask and different years, etc., and lots of variety. There were so many. People kind of, you know, great for the connoisseur, but a lot of people just couldn't get their heads around what it meant. There's just so much. But what I've done is created a core range that fuses the distilling styles and also weaves together the extraordinary casks, and done it in a way that stays true to BenRiach and to Speyside, and makes it even more Speyside and more BenRiach before, with inspiration from 1994. So I've kind of changed the original 10-year-old, which was the 10-year-old that's been in the market, and woven in a little bit of a trace of smoke, but not enough, only less than 5 ppm. So not enough that you'll pick up it is peat phenols, but what you will get is more body, for example. So I wanted to fine tune and develop the recipe to have this beautiful balance of delicacy, this estery character that I studied at Scotch Whisky Research Institute, just to really amplify that. And then also this body. So it's like the patisserie of Speyside. So that kind of term is obviously my creation. So you can blame me for that. I describe it as the patisserie of Speyside because of all these layers. So I'm very into my layers. I like multi-layered. I like integration of flavor, and I like individual, authentic distillery character. So it's more of a process of individuation, I would say, and bringing out the distinctive facets that are true to that distillery. So that's what I've tried to do with that. And then the Smoky 10, which was Curiositas is now called the Smoky 10. Yeah, it's that simple, and you can blame me for the name, because I used to just say for curiosity, this is the Smoky 10, and it kind of stuck. And it's matured in bourbon, Jamaican rum barrels, and also in virgin oak. So, toasted and charred virgin oak, and it fuses together the classic and the smoky style. So what you get is almost like this, the Caribbean in Speyside in a pine forest with a campfire and lots of fruit thrown on it. So it's really, really luscious. And the smoke from BenRiach is always sweet. So for me, this has been an amazing journey, because I've worked with all these Islay distilleries, and now to work with Speyside peat from the wood-rich, the peat slightly more inland, that gives you, as well as phenols, gives you vanilla, gives you sweet, luscious smokiness. And this one, I think people are going to love, if you love that kind of really luscious fruit and that wonderful smokiness. And what I'm also looking for is to capture your senses, and then for it to crescendo on the palate. So I'm always looking for the taste to exceed the expectations on the nose. I think that is the most important thing in every single whiskey I will work with, is balance, it's enrichment. Yeah, and I forgot, I'll just drop this one in. BenRiach. Can you see it?
Yeah.
BA for balance and enrich the balance. That's what I'm all about. See? That's what BenRiach's all about.
Be enriched.
Be enriched.
Plus, you also were claiming the Riach was could be changed to Rachel.
Rach, yeah, that's what I was saying.
Rachel.
I like be enriched. I think that's really cool.
Be enriched.
Thanks for that, because I was saying enrich the balance, but be enriched. I like that. And then you've got the world of flavor. That's the new 12, and these are both brand new. So the 12, another eclectic combination. It's mostly sherry, bourbon, and it's also ruby port pipes. So who would have thought it? The mad blender here has decided to combine sherry, bourbon, and ruby port pipes. Crazy. But when you taste it, wow, I think people will enjoy this. It's more like autumn, and it means that you're bringing out that rainbow fruit, just like you can see in the tube. So you're getting the beautiful aromas of like walking through a forest in Speyside in the autumn, that nuttiness of the leaves. And then you get into the wonderful black forest fruits, and then orange and a cherry on top. And then you come back inside in the warmth, and you're baking a nice cake. And
see, I'm exhausted. Lovely. I'm exhausted just thinking about doing all that stuff.
Oh, it's so much fun. You need to be Willy Wonka at some point.
I am.
Experiment.
I dress like Willy Wonka. Usually.
It's fun. And then the Smoky 12, this is brand new. I mean, there's not many peaty whiskies that are, you can't see it in my light. The Smoky 12.
Yeah.
See, Smoky 12. So, there's very few Islas that are 12 years old. And with this one, I was even more crazy, because what I found really worked was bourbon, sherry, and marsala, just at the right smoking level. So it gives you this great for the winter. You see how I've got your glasses?
Yeah.
The ones you sent me. Thank you very much.
That's a little thank you for
my
being
name
on our show.
Them.
That's right.
Yeah.
So if anyone steals them, hey, wait a minute, it has my name on it. So there you go.
It does. Yes, my sons will not be taking these glasses. So, yeah. So incredibly rich. This is just like standing outside at the moment, with all the wood burners and the wood burning smoke and the leaves and everything. Yeah. And you've got, it's such a sweet aromatic at this time of year.
Smells of autumn. Yeah.
Great. It's so sweet. And it's it's amazing how the smells of the smoke in autumn change, week on week, as it dries out. It's more damp, and then it dries out and it changes again. But this is just that late autumn, and it's got that wonderful, fruit cake, sultana, a little bit of brown sugar. That marsala just beautifully rounds things off. But on its own, I find Marsala, Peter Marsala, it's very intense. It's almost like a sweetie, but it's for me, it's too one-dimensional, which is why, for me, I'm, as you can imagine, I like variety. I like many dimensions. I want to experience that richness. And I get that from combining the classic with the peated style, smoky style, and then layering in these different casks. So yes, you could say I've made my mark, because each one's 3 casks matured. This is our core range, okay? And it's fusing all these different styles together.
Do they have your names?
A world of flavor.
Do the bottles have your name on them? Like a little signature?
Well, here it says my name on the footer label, and then also on the tube as well. We've got John Duff, who was the founder. My name there, and then on the back, it's got my signature.
Very good. Look at that. You're famous.
Yeah, not as famous as John Duff, though. He was the man. He was the founder. He was the one that did all the hard work, building the distillery and bringing it to life. And there's been every generation, everyone that's worked in the distillery since have put their mark on it too. I just get to do the fun part, the artistic part of pulling it all together and thinking like a drinker.
So we had one last question I think we'll end it on, and it's from Ken, and he's asking about the phenol ppm level on the Smoky 12.
Oh, good question. So we have a smoke season every year, and during that smoke season, the number of weeks can vary depending how much we have in inventory already, but it will be the highest that we can get from heating level we can get from the malting process, and that is around about 45 to 50 ppm. So you think ppm, that is very, very similar to some Islas. So other like Lafroig, for example, it's a similar level. However, because the peat's so different and we get a different spectrum of phenols, and as well as with the distillation, we're going to get those sweet and spicy phenols in particular. And the Smoky 12, I'll get there, is around about 30 ppm. Okay, so because I'm blending the fruity style with the smoky style, because I want to keep that lush fruitiness, that sweetness, that lovely body, and then also get into more the phenolics as well, because we go 1% deeper into the faints and distillation, but still have a very short foreshot. So it's getting all that balance right. So what you create is multi-dimensional. It's actually the phenols in BenRiach serve to create more multi-dimensional fruit. And remember, BenRiach, Speyside, fruit-filled forward style all the way, and the smokiness just helps to really bring that out and bake it in that patisserie of Speyside. Baked it, makes it more baked. Get it over the wood burning fire, bake your cake.
Now, Dr. Barrie, one last real quick thing, because then we have to go. But I'm curious, because you love combining all these different flavors, have you ever thought of making a blended malt? And I don't know if you can do it. Well, I guess you can still do it working for Brown-Forman. You can pull from other distilleries outside the company, and that one, because that I would just think would be the mad scientist in you, just wanting to, especially with whiskeys that you used to have. That you used to work with.
Yeah, that would be fun as well. But for me, I'm just loving nurturing these 3 distilleries and just making them the best they can be, and allowing their personalities to shine. So I think, I've got my work cut out at the moment working with these. Never say never. But I think the interest in single malt globally is we've just opened the doors. I say that every year, and it keeps growing, and it keeps growing, and it keeps growing. The whole time I've been in the industry, it's been remarkable. And we've got a few, still there's countries that haven't, people are just waking up to malt. So I think with such beautiful individual malts, I can do my blending through the peating levels, through different cask types, through looking at the influence of age, obviously sampling lots of different casks in different positions in warehouses. I think, you know, that is the way of bringing the enriching the personality of the distillery, and that's what I love doing.
Well, that is wonderful. I mean, that's great, and your passion for this is it's infective or not infective, infectious. I think it's infectious. And it's infected. It's infected. Everything's infected these days.
Yeah, well, we're connected. Isn't it wonderful that we can connect like this? You know, all around the world. You know, for me, I'm very lucky because I have traveled a lot in my lifetime. So, you know, I almost don't need to travel now because I have my sensory memories and everything. And then, you know, being able to connect with people like this is just fantastic, and bring it to the world. You know, we're, you know, really it'd be great if people could come to the distillery. So hopefully next year, you'll be able to come to Scotland and visit the distilleries, and we'd love to have you.
I definitely want to sit on the shores, the western shores of Scotland, and drinking a dram of whiskey.
Well, I think you need to go to the Banffshire coast.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Okay, yeah.
It's the only distillery that's on the coast, on that north coast.
Is that where they filmed Local Hero?
Yes, it's right beside there.
Boom.
Only a few miles from there. So yeah, it's right there in that red post box.
Right.
Yeah, but Glenglassaugh is right beside Port. So, and before I mention it, what does Glenglassaugh mean, do you think?
Well, I know Glen is valley. Glassa means furry animals. Glen of furry, valley of furry animals. That was a guess. It was a stat.
glass is a furry animal. I wonder which language that's in.
I don't know. I'm a little rusty on my Gaelic.
Anyway, glass. My youngest son is called Douglas, and in French it means deux glaces, means two ices, two ice creams. So we always joke that. Two glass. You can have deux glaces.
If that's ice, does that mean that's why we call glasses because they look kind of like ice?
When you go into the geology of this, we could speak for hours about this. Serpentine marble at Glenglassaugh. They used to make glass. There was lime kilns, the highest mineral content in the mainland of the Scotch distillery. I mean, there's so much to it. But Douglas means dark water. Glass.
Duffy is Gaelic for or Irish for black, and Dublin is actually black water. So
no, Douglas is dark water.
I know, Scotland. But Irish and Irish.
Yeah.
Irish, and actually Dublin, I think, actually came from the Vikings founded it, so there might be a little Norse in there. Anyway,
I thought it's Valley of the Water of Life.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Well, to Scotland, we'll just have to translate ourselves through the whiskey. So, yes. Yeah, really appreciate you coming on the show today. Nice to virtually meet you and talk to you. I think a lot of folks have really enjoyed it. They've been chiming in, so thank you.
Yeah, and the two of you need to meet and talk. You know, distilling stuff.
I'd love it, absolutely love it. You know, there's always more to learn than you know.
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
You know, I'm just at the start of my journey.
So next week we have a compatriot of yours, a fellow Scotsman, Dr. Nick Savage.
Oh yes,
Glencairn Distillery in the Lowlands. He'll be joining us, and until then, everybody, you can check out this episode and past episodes on YouTube and Zavvi.co. Thank you very much, Dr. Barrie. This is great. I mean, you're up there in the Mount Rushmore of blenders. I mean, it's huge. So it was really, really nice of you to take the time to be with us.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. And stay safe, take care, and good health to you all.
health.
Everyone that's watching, good health to you all.
Sláinte.
And continue to enjoy your whiskey. Slàinte
Slàinte.
Úscava Gubra.
Ooh, nice. Yes. All right. Bye,
Take
kids.
care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.